Nobody quite knows which drink it is that takes him over the edge of being merely a social or hearty, laughing drinker into a morose and hungover wretched.
Booze, wild parties, and utter debauchery. Hollywood actors love living the fast life, but it quickly descends into tragedy. Here are the 15 heartbreaking stories of iconic stars we've lost to alcohol abuse.
Somebody ought to make the toast. Come on! Everybody!
Be your cockeyed.
Who says I'm cockeyed? I ain't cockeyed.
Number 15. Marilyn Monroe. Hollywood may have a gazillion actors within its rich history, but only a few can ever be true icons. Marilyn Monroe, though, she was the best of the bunch, the quintessential actress of her era. Idolized for her beauty and charisma, the silver screen legend fascinated millions during her heyday and even in death. However, her story was far from a fairy tale. It's one of fame, addiction, and tragedy in that order. Born Norma Jean Baker, Marilyn's rise to stardom was an uphill drive. She came from a poor family, was abandoned, and spent most of her childhood in foster homes. Poor Marilyn. Her fans admired her rise from such a humble background, believing it was a tale of determination, ambition, and fearless spirit. Yet no one knew how much the pressures of fame were silently eroding her mental and physical well-being. As a matter of fact, it was only until a few years ago that the mystery surrounding Marilyn's life began to unfold. An archive of diaries, poems, and letters was published, highlighting her challenges. From utter loneliness to overcoming a deep-seated fear of disappointing others, nothing in her life came easy. And let's not even get started on her rise to stardom. After signing a bumper contract at Fox in the 50s, Marilyn was given the bombshell blonde niche. Her beauty, charm, and innocence skyrocketed her in the industry, where she found the sweet spot of an American sensibility. And no, the public's obsession with Marilyn wasn't entirely positive or healthy. A significant factor in her rise as a sex symbol in the early 1950s came from Hugh Hefner's unauthorized publication of her provocative photos in Playboy in 1953. And it was not the last time Monroe would have to put up with shaming and backlash as part of her supposed adoration by her American audience. Worse, her sensual image deprived her of getting more serious roles in the industry. It got so bad that in 1954, she parted ways with Fox after refusing to star in yet another musical comedy. By the time Monroe returned to Fox and achieved true critical acclaim in the late 1950s, the toll of public pressure was as clear as day. She battled insomnia, sadness, and anxiety, and her struggles with alcoholism and prescription drug addiction worsened. Ultimately, these issues spiraled out of control, making it impossible for her to continue working. In 1962, Marilyn tragically passed away from an acute barbiturate overdose. Looking back, it's fair to say her tragic passing at such a young age stemmed from the ruthless public hounding she faced throughout her career. Contemporaries like Jean Cocteau even alluded that her death serves as a harrowing lesson to gossip mills and other media to stop spying and tormenting film stars. They are humans, after all. Only a few women in Marilyn's era managed to overcome the mental health issues caused by the pressures and expectations of their ostensibly adoring public. But unfortunately, the next woman on the list wasn't so lucky. Number 14. Veronica Lake. As one of the biggest celebrities of the 1940s, Lake's life must have been surreal at first glance. We're talking about an extra plucked from obscurity who turned overnight into a Hollywood star. It's what dreams are made of, right? Well then, what if I told you Lake sacrificed her childhood to become a star? After a young Lake made a podium finish in a beauty pageant, her mother set the ball rolling for her to become a movie star. And just like that, Lake gave up her own dreams and devoted herself to intense training to perfect her craft. Luckily, it paid off. In 1940, with just a few minor roles to her name, Lake landed a part in I Wanted Wings. It was here that moviegoers first saw her signature look, her golden hair cascading over one eye in the now famous peekaboo style. Lake would later confess that it was to hide her nerves. But hey, it was all worth it. Her adopted dream of fame and critical acclaim was accomplished. She began to star in femme fatale roles in film noir, along with some of the biggest names in the industry, until her world came crashing down. You see, back in the 40s, actresses never had a voice. No one dared to talk back to directors. No one could even have a mind of theirs. Lake stood against this practice and went toe-to-toe with figureheads, earning her a terrible reputation in the industry. It's not to say she was perfect, though. She often showed up late, hungover, and even fought with fellow stars for the wrong reasons. Remember the 1941 incident while filming Sullivan's Travels? She was heavily pregnant at the time and even tried to hide it from the director, Preston Sturges, who was so furious when he discovered the truth that he had to be physically restrained. In 1943, Lake accidentally tripped over a cable on set, leading to the premature birth of her second child, who sadly passed away shortly after. Just weeks later, she filed for divorce from her husband. With her life fast becoming a train wreck, Lake began to get scrutinized by the press and the public. But the truth of the matter was that, behind the scenes, Veronica Lake was losing herself. She became heavily alcoholic to cope with the personal tragedy of losing her child. And everything turned worse when the press and negative reviews began to derail her career. From 1948 through 1951, Veronica's Paramount contract got shelved. Her second husband filed for bankruptcy, and soon after, the IRS seized their home due to unpaid taxes. This made her move to theater, where she made mediocre features. After 3 divorces, she was drifting between cheap hotels in New York City and was arrested multiple times for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. Sadly, she was never able to overcome her alcoholism and died in 1973 of acute hepatitis and acute kidney injury. She was only 50.
Where will I find the lady? Hello, lady. So I took them with me, in case we ever bumped into each other. I guess we just...
Number 13, Andre the Giant. Now, I know what you're thinking. What is this giant-looking mammoth of a man doing here? He's Andre the Giant, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I know. He was a pretty big hotshot in the WWE universe, but apart from that, it's quite literally entertainment. An athlete, professional writer, and a true entertainer, the eighth wonder of the world, Andrei Rene Roussimoff. From the late 1960s to the mid-1980s, Andre the Giant was the top-earning professional wrestler and a global sensation. Promoters fiercely competed to book him, knowing that his mere appearance alone would guarantee a sold-out event. Better yet, the fans adored him and cheered him, treating him like the giant celebrity he was. But you see, Andre had a problem. A really big one. Standing over 7 feet tall and weighing more than 500 pounds, his massive build was the result of a rare hormonal disorder called acromegaly. And yes, his otherworldly frame placed a heavy burden on his health. He was known to drink an astounding amount, sometimes drowning 6 bottles of wine before a wrestling match and still performing without missing a beat. But his beer-drinking feats were even more astonishing. On one occasion, he reportedly drank 117 beers in a single sitting, and other stories claim he drank as many as 156 beers in one go. Can you believe that? In addition to his ferocious drinking, legend has it that Andre also had an insatiable appetite for heavy meals. Would you blame him, though? His extraordinary size demanded exorbitant amounts of nourishment, especially calories. Some estimates claim that he drank north of 7,000 calories per day from alcohol alone, which was definitely not healthy. At the peak of his career, his health rapidly regressed, and by the mid-1980s, he was a shadow of himself. He even had to trim his packed wrestling schedule to recuperate. After several diagnoses and under-the-knife appointments, Andre found that the damage to his organs was irreversible. He died in 1993 at the age of 46 from a heart failure while in Paris for his father's funeral, a sad end to Mr. Eighth Wonder himself. Up next is an even darker tale. Number 12, William Holden. Let's be real, guys. If there's one man who truly personifies the pre-1960s ideal of the American male, it just has to be William Holden. cut from a different stone, William Holden was a different kind of leading man. His characters were flawed, passionate, and cynical, but he was loved around the world for his sensitive, charming, and funny allure. Alas, Holden lived a complicated life, plagued by his insecurities and alcoholism. Unlike a certain Veronica Lake, who was basically forced into the industry by her parents, William Holden's family didn't even want him to go into acting. However, it's a good thing he did because he gained lots of success in the industry. Remember classic films like 1950's Sunset Boulevard and Stalag 17 in 1953, the latter of which earned him an Academy Award? In a career that spanned over 4 decades, Holden not only became one of the best actors in the 1950s, but also most adored. Viewers couldn't get enough of his serenading depth, particularly in cynical roles that fit his tough guy persona. After breaking out early, he struggled to smash leading roles because of his age, but his break finally came with Golden Boy in 1939, about a decade before his nuanced work in Sunset Boulevard and The Bridge on the River Kwai. But again, despite his professional success, Holden struggled with alcoholism, which not only affected his career, but also his personal life. He was the spectacle to many co-stars who would helplessly watch him do crazy things on set, like practicing handstands on upper-story windowsills. On one occasion, Holden jumped from a 10-story window but managed to catch himself before falling. To the shock of his co-stars, he dangled from the ledge, slowly releasing his grip one finger at a time until he was hanging by just 2 fingers. Rosalind Russell described him as being strong as an ox, stubborn as a monkey, and luckier than anything. Sadly, not even a 4-leaf clover could snatch him away from rapidly aging due to his hard-driving lifestyle. By the late 1960s, Holden's career had stalled, and his good looks gave way to a more haggard appearance. One writer even compared his face to a roadmap of the United States. Plus, it didn't help that younger stars like Peter O'Toole, Steve McQueen, and Paul Newman were soaring through the ranks. But as sad as it sounds, Holden wasn't to burn out without a fight. Even as his leading man looks began to fade, Holden successfully reinvented himself as a character actor. With groundbreaking roles in The Wild Bunch and Network, the actor was able to reaffirm his place in Hollywood. In fact, some of his finest performances came later in his career. Remember films like The Counterfeit Trader, Wild Rovers, and Breezy? He even starred in the 1973 television series The Blue Knight. Yet, despite this resurgence, Holden's battle with alcoholism persisted. His addiction counselor, as noted by biographer Bob Thomas, warned him of the inevitable. Holden responded, saying he knew how it's going to be, lonely, alone, without dignity. Sadly, he was right. On screen, William Holden was masterful at portraying dramatic death scenes. He was gunned down by a deranged femme fatale in Sunset Boulevard, died heroically in uniform in The Bridges of Toko-Ri, and perished defending a fading code of honor in The Wild Bunch. In real life, though, his death was anything but cinematic. It lacked the heroism and dignity of his iconic roles, a stark contrast to the grandeur of his film legacy. On the 12th of November 1981, a drunken Holden slipped on a rug in his Santa Monica apartment, hitting his head on a nightstand, which led to a nasty cut. Unaware of how serious his injury was, Holden attempted to stop the bleeding with tissue. He bled to death 30 minutes later, just a few feet from a phone that could have saved his life.
Was I in here last night and did I spend a $20 bill?
Yeah.
Oh boy, what a load that is off my mind. I thought.
Number 11. William Claude Dukenfield. Despite it being more than 100 years since the heydays of W.C. Fields, there's really no indication that his name will be obscured under the sands of time. His filmography was elite, and his drunken tales are arguably more legendary. Born William Claude Dukenfield, Fields had a rough upbringing and left home at the age of 11 due to the violent relationship he had with his father. He rose to fame as a self-taught juggler on the streets and became one of the greatest wisecrackers in the industry. He was loved for having a sharp wit and cantankerous on-screen persona that mirrored some of the characters he portrayed. However, Fields' trajectory rings all too familiar. A talented individual achieves remarkable success only to be followed by struggles with addiction and a subsequent downfall. Staying true to his Philadelphia roots, Fields lived life on his own terms, unconcerned with others' opinions. His work boldly challenged the limits of what films could depict and satirize. But more importantly, he was a versatile actor who influenced numerous iterations of entertainment, effortlessly transitioning his act from vaudeville to silent films and eventually to the golden age of cinema. He even wrote most of his own scripts. However, despite gaining widespread acknowledgement as a comedic genius, Fields struggled with severe alcoholism throughout his life. He drank all kinds of stuff, but martinis were his favorite. Legends say he often had them for breakfast and kept a thermos filled with martinis in his dressing room, disguised as pineapple juice. But that's not all. At times, he also enjoyed gin and grapefruit, rum and coke, red wine, beer, sherry, bourbon, rye, scotch, and Irish whiskey. He was also fond of what he called a marijuana cigarette. Wondering if he had any famous drinking buddies? Of course he did. Fields didn't have many friends within the industry, but he loved his drinking partners, John Barrymore and Louise Brooks, the latter of whom historians believe were more than friends. But sadly, Fields spiraled out of control. His drinking frequently affected his work, causing unpredictable behavior on film sets. For example, while filming Tales of Manhattan, did you know that Fields actually refused to stop drinking? Yep, he even claimed that his flask held lemonade, even though it was obviously filled with something stronger. With episodes of erratic behavior, so many scenes had to be cut. Toward the end of his life, Fields' health deteriorated rapidly, and he spent his final days in a sanatorium where he passed away from internal bleeding on Christmas Day in 1946. Number 10. Louise Brooks. Yes, who other than the alleged romantic interest of W.C. Fields? Like many who lived through the Prohibition era, Brooks developed a deep love for alcohol. In fact, she once admitted that her addiction stemmed from the prevalence of alcoholism among her peers during her youth, a devastating trend that went largely unacknowledged at the time. At the age of 15, Brooks began her career as a dancer and performed on multiple tours, including with Ted Shawn. After losing her job, she worked as a chorus girl in George White's Scandals and hopped on a couple of other dance openings in New York City. While performing in the Follies, Brooks caught the eye of Walter Wanger, a producer at Paramount Pictures, who linked her with a 5-year contract with the studio. There, she took on several supporting roles in Paramount films before landing her big break in 1928's Beggars of Life. During this period, she developed a close friendship with actress Marion Davies. She became part of the elite social circle surrounding press magnate William Randolph Hearst at Hearst Castle in San Simeon. By 1938, she had starred in 17 silent films, 8 sound films, and even a couple of German feature films, which made her an international name. However, despite her early achievements, Brooks' career began to decline as soon as it peaked. She became infamous for being unprofessional, for having a problematic character, and for the fiery spats with Hollywood executives. Plus, she also battled alcoholism and depression, which further impacted her professional life. By the mid-1930s, she had left Hollywood and moved to New York City, where she took up work as a radio host. In the years that followed, Brooks lived in obscurity and poverty in a modest apartment, surviving by drinking and escorting. By this point, she had been completely forgotten by the wealthy and influential friends she once had. Frustrated by her growing isolation, Brooks began writing a revealing memoir inspired by Goethe's Faust. However, after spending years on the project, she suddenly destroyed the entire manuscript by throwing it into an incinerator. As time went on, her alcohol consumption increased, her mental health further declined, and her career prospects as a film actress were at rock bottom. According to the federal census in May 1940, she was living in a $55 a month apartment at 1317 North Fairfax Avenue in West Hollywood, where she struggled to make ends meet. But thankfully, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. After her films were rediscovered by cinephiles in the 1950s, the once-retired Brooks began writing articles about her experiences in the film industry. Her insightful essays gained widespread acclaim and marked a resurgence of interest in her fast-dying career. She died in 1985, 3 years after publishing her memoir, Lulu in Hollywood. Although her career was short-lived and, frankly speaking, underwhelming, Brooks is remembered for her time in the industry as an icon of the flapper era. And yes, her signature bob haircut is still loved to this day.
Hi, Professor Buxton.
Well, what brings you back here, my dear child?
I forgot my vanity. Now I don't feel dressed without my lipstick.
Number 9. Lana Turner. With several award nominations across a 50-year career and hailed as one of the most beautiful actresses to ever grace the silver screen, Lana Turner's life has just been a dream to countless women who wish to make it big in the industry. But she was far from perfect. She suffered many personal tragedies and failed marriages throughout the course of her life. Born on February 8, 1921, to a working-class family in Wallace, Idaho, Turner's family wasn't rich. But despite their modest means, the family was content, and she had fond memories of family sing-alongs and dancing to records after dinner. But sadly, the joys didn't last. After a successful night at the card table to supplement his income as a coal miner, Turner's dad was fatally robbed on his way home. Struggling to make ends meet, Turner and her mother moved to Southern California, seeking better opportunities. Lana found solace in movies, saving part of her lunch money to watch films on Saturdays. She admired the glamorous costumes worn like actresses like Kay Francis and dreamed of wearing similar outfits. With a sprinkle of good fortune, magazine publisher W.R. Wilkinson spotted her and introduced her to director Mervyn LeRoy, who cast her in They Won't Forget. Her small role as a schoolgirl earned positive reviews, and she became known as the Sweater Girl for her iconic tight blue sweater in the film. When Mervyn LeRoy moved to MGM, he brought 20-year-old Lana Turner along and featured her in good films that skyrocketed her career. With her growing success, she quickly bought her mother a new house and starred in major films like The Postman Always Rings Twice, The Bad and the Beautiful, and Peyton Place. She even raised millions for the defense budget during World War II. Alas, Turner's personal life was deteriorating by the day. She struggled in her relationships, got divorced 6 times, was a chronic smoker, and was losing her battle against alcoholism. In fact, she smoked so much that cigarettes had to be airbrushed from her photographs. Her habits of drinking and smoking ultimately led to a throat cancer diagnosis in 1992, prompting her to undergo 8 weeks of painful radiation therapy for a malignant tumor. By 1993, she announced that her cancer was in remission and that she had finally quit smoking. But her choice was too late. Lana's cancer returned, and her jaw and neck became severely swollen. She was in great pain and even had to be fed through a stomach tube. She died in 1996 at her home, aged 75. Number 8. John Barrymore. When you really think about it, is there any surprise that John Barrymore had such a successful career? Coming from a family of actors, you can say being a thespian was in his DNA. Renowned for his charisma and powerful performances, he easily found success in various plays before transitioning to films in the silent era. And boy, was his big break in the film Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde so good. After that, he broke through Hollywood and ferociously carved his niche with successful films like The Beloved Rogue, where he played the legendary French poet and adventurer François Villon. The Sea Beast, which was a loose adaptation of Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and When a Man Loves, which highlighted his innate ability to handle complex characters with emotional depth. However, behind the scenes, Barrymore's life was marred by struggles with alcoholism. His heavy drinking often overshadowed his achievements and led to numerous tales of debauchery. I mean, who can forget the times when he arrived intoxicated on set and was unable to perform due to his condition? One night, while drunk, he accidentally went into the women's restroom instead of a men's room and peed in a potted plant. Yup, such was the chaotic lifestyle of the big profile. As his alcoholism progressed, it began to take a toll on his career and personal life. He experienced multiple failed marriages and strained family relationships, and his professional opportunities dwindled as studios hesitated to work with him. The funny thing, though, is that Barrymore was well known for his heavy drinking long before he began his film career. In his early days, he occasionally arrived at performances intoxicated or even missed shows entirely. But by the 1930s, years of alcoholism had taken a toll on his physical appearance, and numerous accounts highlight his difficulties in recalling lines. Once celebrated for his record-setting performances in Hamlet, he now struggled to remember his lines in films like Counselor at Law. His memory issues would ultimately cost him a role in the 1934 production of Hat, Coat, and Glove, and the opportunity to star in a film adaptation of Hamlet. In some instances, he couldn't even recall the name of the character he was portraying. His reliance on alcohol got so bad that he filed for bankruptcy amidst a decline in his health and career. He died at the age of 60, leaving behind a polarizing legacy associated with two key traits: a wide regard as one of the greatest American actors of all time, and a man who struggled with alcoholism. In the end, like many remarkable artists, Barrymore was burdened by an inner darkness that unavoidably led to his downfall.
So long now, you filled my life. Like a great noise that I hear everywhere in my heart.
Number 7. Richard Burton. Despite being an outstanding stage and voice actor, and one of the world's most iconic movie stars too, it's kind of funny how his topsy-turvy relationship with Elizabeth Taylor is the first thing that comes to mind when the name Richard Burton pops up. And second though, a penchant for alcohol. But before that, Richard Burton, or should we say Richard Jenkins, was raised in a coal mining family. Down the line, he ventured into plays and made a big break with his exhilarating performance as Hamlet. His powerful stage presence, along with his deep, gravelly voice, quickly made him a rising star adored by the world. Soon after, Burton transitioned to film, gaining international recognition for his amazing roles throughout the 1950s. But his best performances arguably came in the 1960s in films like Beckett, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and of course, Cleopatra, where he starred opposite Elizabeth Taylor. Together, they formed one of Hollywood's most famous power couples and sparked a much publicized romance. We'll get to that in a minute. Burton, a man famous for his rascality and bravado, loved his booze more than anything. He even claimed that he couldn't be civilized without a drink. Legends say he would drink vodka and tonic, whiskey and soda, champagne, and whatnot all day long until he passed out. Other than that, he was hardly ever seen without vodka martinis, Jack Daniels, Bordeaux, or straight vodkas in hand. Early in his career, Richard Burton proudly claimed he could drink half a gallon of cognac or vodka and still hold it together on stage, even boasting he once drank a yard of beer in 10 seconds. Along with his femme fatale Taylor, Burton drank all over the world's best hotels, and it was there they had several infamous fights. She once chased him with a broken vodka bottle in a hotel suite at the Le Grand Hotel in Rome. A bartender once recalled how Burton held his martini without spilling a drop, despite Taylor hitting him severally with a rose bouquet. Alas, Burton's alcoholism eventually got the better of him. His performances became inconsistent as his health deteriorated, and his once strong body became frail and haggard. He even battled with cirrhosis of the kidneys and liver. On the 5th of August, 1984, Burton died after suffering a cerebral hemorrhage. He was only 58. Number 6. Clara Bo. Born in 1905 in what historians describe as the most brutal poverty that was known at the time, who would have thought that Clara Bo would become Hollywood's original It Girl and one of the most iconic figures of the silent film era? We mean, she grew up in one of the worst places in Brooklyn, was raised by a schizophrenic mother, and her alcoholic father was no better. However, everything changed in 1921 when the then 16-year-old Bo submitted her photo to a fame and fortune contest in a magazine and won. Inspired, she dropped out of school to pursue a career in acting, but however, she soon discovered why only a few make it in the industry. Bo had to fight for auditions and minor roles, and despite having a perfect screening, she never got a movie contract. Did she give up though? Of course not. Like a woman possessed, Bo worked tirelessly to make a name for herself. She made 15 films in 1925 alone, including a dazzling performance in Wings, the first film to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Alas, Bo's career was marked by immense popularity and intense scrutiny. While her genuine acting talent earned her critical appraisal, much of the public's attention was also centered on her off-screen lifestyle. To be fair, Bo did enjoy being in the limelight. She broke the molds of the traditional demure female stars and never cared for what was said about her. She went wild at parties, was involved in romantic affairs with high-profile men, and never shied away from flaunting her flashing life in public. One of the most infamous claims about Clara Bo came from Kenneth Anger's controversial book Hollywood Babylon, where he alleged she had affairs with the entire USC football team. Although this rumor has been thoroughly debunked, it goes to show how Bo became a prime target for scandalous and unfounded stories. Some of them were true, though. At one elite party, Bo was said to kiss a married judge in front of his wife and make provocative moves on the dance floor. With 5 broken engagements in 5 years, Bo's entire reputation revolved around scandals, and she was known as the woman who loved drinking, gambling, cussing, and, well, you know. Sooner rather than later, the incessant pressure from the media, combined with the stress of her celebrity lifestyle and mental health struggles, eventually took its toll on her. She withdrew from Hollywood in the early 1930s, a time that should easily have been her peak. Until her death in 1965 from a heart attack, Bo was never able to rekindle the flame of her once glowing career. But before we go into the sad story of the next actor on our list, make sure you subscribe and smash the post notifications so you'll be the first to know when another mind-boggling video like this gets rolled out. Already subscribed? Alright then, can you guess who's next? Here's a hint. Her incredible talent ended up being overshadowed by the overwhelming pressures of fame and personal demons.
Please be careful.
That's now my plan to.
Number 5. Gail Russell. Looking back, it really hurts to see Gail Russell's name on the list, but we sadly can't rewrite history. Her story was a classic descent, how a young, promising actress was punctuated by fame and anxiety, leading to an eventual descent into alcoholism. As a young girl, Russell was very introverted and preferred the solitude of painting and watching movies. But everything changed when her family moved to California. She was only 14. Grab your popcorn if you haven't already, because the story of how Gail Russell was discovered sounds like something straight out of a movie itself. One day, a high school classmate of Gail's hitched a ride with a man who, unbeknownst to the classmate, was William Meiklejohn, a Paramount executive. The classmate spoke highly of Gail, even comparing her to the glamorous Hedy Lamarr. Intrigued by the description, Meiklejohn sent a talent scout to find her. At first, Gail was reluctant. She was introverted and, well, just wasn't feeling like honoring the screening invitation. She only agreed because of her mother's encouragement, and thankfully so, because her beauty and undeniable charm led to an immediate contract with Paramount. She made her film debut in 1943's Henry Aldrich Gets Glamour. But despite her early success, she found the pressures of stardom overwhelming. Shy and self-conscious, she struggled with severe stage fright and a lack of confidence that haunted her throughout her career. Her solution? Alcohol. She started drinking on the set of The Uninvited to ease her spirits. But while that may have worked, she kept on losing herself. She began to drink heavily during scene breaks and always had a vodka in her dressing room. Soon, Paramount Studios started loaning Gail to other film studios for a string of unremarkable movies. Word around the grapevine was that Gail was difficult to manage. But it wasn't until 1953 that her alcoholism truly became public. Arrested for drunk driving, this marked the first in a series of run-ins with the law. Just 2 years later, she was involved in a hit-and-run accident, prompting her to admit publicly that she had a drinking problem. Unfortunately, this admission did little to curb her addiction. In 1957, she was arrested yet again when she drove her car through a cafe window, hitting the night janitor. And like that wasn't enough, she boldly told the judge she didn't even know how many drinks she had before driving. Although she promised to quit drinking after that incident, she found it impossible to stick to her resolution. The once promising actress became a shadow of her former self, and by the time she passed away in 1961 at the age of 36, she had largely disappeared from Hollywood. When she was found dead in her Los Angeles apartment just weeks before her 37th birthday, empty vodka bottles were found littered around her and throughout the room. It was a shocking and painful reminder of just how much alcohol had consumed her life. More heartbreak awaits, though. Number 4. Gig Young. Not to be rude, but is there anyone whose life better illustrates how Hollywood success can conceal deep personal struggles than Gig Young's? Known for his handsome charm and on-screen talent, Young had a flourishing career, but his darker off-screen life was marred by alcoholism and self-destruction. Despite starting acting a bit late in his 30s, Young still had a pretty great career. He appeared in hits like Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, Don't They, and of course 1948's The Three Musketeers. And then came his big moment. For his portrayal of an alcoholic in 1951's Come Fill the Cup, he received critical acclaim along with James Cagney. But while his on-screen success was pretty obvious in the golden era, his life beyond the silver screen was just as fantastic. He was beloved for his lively personality, but little did anyone know there was a darker side to him. We're not just talking about the occasional dose of vodka or liquor. We mean full-blown, daily consumption. Alcohol was part of his daily life, and it kept getting worse, to the point where he began losing roles. Ever wondered why director Mel Brooks fired him from the Blazing Saddles comedy? Young was originally cast as the Waco Kid, but collapsed on set from alcohol withdrawal on his first day of filming. Brooks had no choice but to replace him, marking the beginning of a steep career decline for Young. You see, his addiction didn't stop with his career. It also wreaked havoc on his personal life. Married 5 times, his relationships were fraught with instability. His second wife died from cancer, while his third marriage to actress Elizabeth Montgomery ended things due to his abusive behavior, largely fueled by alcohol. Even his fourth wife left him because of his drinking. You think that's crazy? You've seen nothing yet. His last marriage to a German actress ended in the most tragic way imaginable. In a heartbreaking incident, both thespians lost their lives in their apartment following an intentional gun draw 3 weeks after their wedding. But what's more chilling is the fact that Young left no explanation as to why he did it. There was no note, and to this day, no clear motive has been determined. Whether it was driven by alcohol or some deeper psychological issue remains a mystery. However, one thing that's crystal clear is that Gig Young's life ended in a horrifying act that shook the halls of Hollywood, and to this day, his burning questions will never be answered. Guess what? Our next boozer was just as wild, save the crazy gun part. Number 3. Spencer Tracy. Surprised to see him here? We're not. His life was a classic case of the dissonance between public persona and private reality. On screen, he was celebrated as one of Hollywood's good guys, earning 9 Academy Award nominations for Best Actor, a feat only matched by Laurence Olivier. Plus, his career spanned an impressive 4 decades, during which he appeared in 77 films, becoming a beloved figure known for his charm and enduring allure. However, he was anything but that when the cameras weren't rolling. Reports of his violent tendencies, alcoholism, and predatory behavior towards women painted a troubling picture. To make things worse, MGM executives constantly buried his secrets to protect his reputation. But while their publicity machine was indeed powerful, even that couldn't hide his alcoholism. And unlike most boozers, Tracy loved binge drinking. Tracy would so often lock himself in the room, strip naked, and get into the bathtub. There, he would stay submerged, sometimes up to a week, drinking whiskey the entire time. It was so bad that he wouldn't leave the tub, even for basic needs, until his binge ended. Then, he would clean himself up, get dressed, pack his suitcase filled with empty bottles, and leave. But guess what? He was a violent man when he was drunk. He frequently had explosive outbursts, leading to many bar fights where he usually ended up in worse shape than his opponents. On one occasion, he found himself waking up in a padded cell in Chicago. Worst of all, according to restaurateur Toots Shore, Tracy was banned from a New York brothel after hitting one of the women there. However, this shouldn't imply that alcohol was solely responsible for his bad behavior. While he was indeed a mean drunk, his cruelty often carried over into his sober moments. He was known to be arrogant and outright cruel to lesser actors and crew members on set. Throughout his adult life, Tracy struggled with the aforementioned vices and more. He also smoked cigarettes, took pills, and kept up with his prolonged drinking. These three, and the fact that he was overweight, led him to poor health in his 60s. Karma, perhaps? In 1963, Tracy was hospitalized due to severe breathlessness, and doctors diagnosed him with pulmonary edema, a condition caused by the heart's inability to pump blood effectively, leading to fluid accumulation in the lungs. Additionally, his blood pressure was alarmingly high, requiring constant medical attention. He ultimately passed away at the age of 67 from a heart attack. Check out who we have next. Number 2, Errol Flynn. Born in Tasmania in 1909, Errol Flynn had the world in a chokehold with his charismatic persona and crazy stunts. In no time at all, he became the symbol of fierce masculinity. However, when are we going to learn? Behind the glamour of the silver screen, actors so often live crazy, debauchery lives, and Errol Flynn was no different. In fact, his entire life was a wild dance. The proverbial playboy became famous for his countless scandals with women and alcohol, of course. Whether it was picking up the habit of drinking odorless vodka on set from Anne Sheridan or wooing Princess Irene of Romania, Flynn pursued his own desires and with little concern for the consequences he left behind. The world was his oyster, and he made sure to savor every taste by drinking all over the world. He clinked glasses in Cuba, took booze in Malibu, flew to the Eve Club in London, and had wild fun in New York. On his private boat, he threw wild parties fueled by debauchery. If you looked up eccentric in a dictionary, his name would have come up as the definition. He was once arrested on a drunkenness charge after stealing a cop's badge, and he never failed to drink on set. His usual practice was bringing a doctor's bag with him to work every day containing his daily medicine, 2/5 of vodka. Once, the bar on the Warner lot was shut down by Mr. Warner himself because Flynn kept getting too drunk on set. From French wines to dark spirits to champagne in fancy establishments, there was nothing Flynn couldn't drink. He even injected vodka into his oranges when he was banned from drinking on set. And when you add to the fact that he had several bottles of vodka every day, it's easy to see why his vices eventually led to his demise. To buttress this, his heart and lungs had already sustained irreparable damage in his 30s. At just 32, the rapidly aging icon received a warning from his doctor that he would die within 5 years unless he changed his lifestyle. But instead of altering his habits, he doubled down on partying and, as funny as it sounds, outlived the doctor's prediction by 13 years. He passed away at 50 from a heart attack caused by acute cirrhosis of the liver. The doctors who performed his autopsy were astonished. They believed it should have been sooner. In any case, as the legendary boozer Flynn was, it's unsurprising that the actor was buried with 6 bottles of whiskey in his coffin. After all, only one man could arguably beat Flynn in drinking, and he's next. Number 1, Oliver Reed. In the history of Hollywood's most notorious drinkers, Oliver Reed holds a distinct position. Who could blame him? His skills as an actor and a ladies' man could only be matched by his love for booze, the latter of which sometimes eclipsed the former. Yup, you heard it, Reed loved alcohol so much that he once declared he didn't live in the world of sobriety. But here's the catchy part. Born in southwest London in 1938, Reed's father was a successful sports journalist. His family was wealthy, and he grew up as a child of privilege, a true aristocrat, if you may. He went to good schools and was groomed with good manners. Even as World War II intensified, his family enjoyed a comfortable life in their countryside home, while others sought refuge in shelters. However, while one would think that a soft life would make him weak, it turned out to be the opposite. He grew fast and huge, and he was stronger, bigger, and faster than his peers. No one dared to bully him. And when the time came to switch to acting, best believe he aced every obstacle, including dyslexia. While many with this condition struggle to have a good memory, Reed was a different gravy. He not only memorized his lines, but also those of others. But perhaps this ease became his undoing, as he often drank alcohol during practice time. Reed believed he could outdrink anyone and never back down from a challenge. He even invented a drink he called gunk, made from a blend of every available beverage at the bar. One of his most famous feats was consuming 126 pints in a single day, which he celebrated by performing a horizontal handstand on the bar. But while his drinking never impacted his work at first, alcohol eventually took its toll. His drinking began to cause disruptions on set, which affected his work and critical success. The climax? Well, probably the time he lost a role in a Steve McQueen film. He threw up on an enraged McQueen after a legendary pub crawl. In a single night, he and his friends allegedly consumed 60 gallons of beer, 32 bottles of scotch, 17 bottles of gin, 4 crates of wine, and a bottle of Baby Sham. Like that wasn't wild enough, Reed also claimed to have downed 106 pints of beer during a 2-day drinking spree right before walking Josephine Burge down the aisle. As the years passed, Reed's health began to deteriorate due to his excessive drinking. He became overweight and suffered from ailments such as gout and kidney issues, which prompted brief attempts at sobriety. Unfortunately, these were often short-lived, as he would fall back into his old habits, sometimes with even more vigor. Remember his passing? Well, that was a pretty good example. Reed was maintaining sobriety while filming in Malta in 1999, but he decided to spend his break in a pub, where he met a group of Royal Navy cadets who challenged him to a drinking and arm wrestling competition. Remember when I said Reed never backed down from a drinking challenge? Sadly, it proved to be his demise. He hadn't even completed his drink when he suddenly collapsed. Despite attempts to resuscitate him, Reed passed away in the ambulance en route to the hospital. In a way, his death kind of sets the whole theme of today's video. It was quite literally from alcohol abuse. With that, we draw the curtains through 15 tragic deaths of Hollywood actors from alcoholism. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like and watch the current video displayed on your screen. It's going to blow your mind.